What would you do if the dog you thought you abandoned forever suddenly appeared in your life again? That's the shocking reality one woman faced when she left her dog at the shelter, desperate and alone. But as the days passed, the pain of that decision started to unravel in ways she never expected. Now her dog, traumatized and lost, must navigate a world of trust, healing, and an uncertain future. Stay with us as we uncover the heartbreaking truth behind one dog's fight to find safety again. This journey is not just about a dog. It's about second chances, forgiveness, and what happens when the past comes knocking. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The morning sun cast a soft glow over the shelter as Emily arrived for her usual shift. It was a typical day, or at least she had hoped it would be. As she stepped out of her car, she noticed a commotion near the entrance. A group of people, including volunteers and animal control officers, stood clustered around something. Emily's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't normal. The noise and movement suggested something was wrong, and her stomach churned with uncertainty. "What's going on?" Emily asked, approaching the front desk. One of the staff members, Alex, looked up with a worried expression. "It's a dog, Emily. We don't know much yet, but it's in a bad state. Animal control had to be called." Emily felt a sense of urgency rush through her. "Where is it?" "Back in the kennel area," Alex replied, gesturing toward the hallway leading to the back. "It's a German Shepherd, but we're not sure what happened. They think it might have been abandoned." A wave of unease washed over Emily. Abandonment was always one of the worst things to witness. She had seen so many dogs who had been neglected or discarded, but she had a feeling this one was different. As she walked to the back, the noise from the shelter began to fade, replaced by a heavy silence that made her feel even more uneasy. She could hear a low whimpering sound coming from the kennels, and it only intensified as she approached the source. There, in the far corner of the kennel, sat a German Shepherd. Her ears were flattened against her head, and her eyes were wide with fear. She looked confused and unsure, as if she didn't know where she was or why she had been brought here. Emily's heart broke as she watched the dog. It was clear she was terrified, and the pain of abandonment seemed to have taken its toll. The dog's coat was dirty, matted with dirt and twigs, her body thin, as though she hadn't been cared for in some time. Emily could see the signs of stress all over the dog's body. Her tail was tucked tightly against her. Her paws fidgeted nervously, and she seemed unwilling to trust anyone who came near her. Emily took a slow, steady breath. This was going to be a challenge, but it wasn't the first time she had dealt with an animal in distress. "Hey there, girl," Emily murmured softly as she knelt down in front of the kennel. "It's okay. You're safe now." The German Shepherd's body stiffened at the sound of Emily's voice. She took a hesitant step back, her eyes darting around as if she was looking for a way to escape. Emily didn't move, knowing that any sudden movements could make the dog even more fearful. Instead, she extended her hand slowly toward the kennel, palm open, trying to show the dog that she meant no harm. The dog sniffed the air, her nostrils flaring slightly, but she didn't move closer. Emily sat back on her heels and took a moment to observe the dog. She could tell the dog was scared, but she wasn't aggressive. That was a good sign. If Emily could gain her trust, she might be able to help her, but for now, she knew she had to be patient. "Hey, it's okay. No one's going to hurt you," Emily said in a calm, soothing tone. She didn't know if the dog could understand her words, but her voice seemed to offer a little comfort. Slowly, the German Shepherd took a tentative step forward. Her nose brushed the bars of the kennel, and Emily could see the hesitation in her eyes. Emily's heart swelled with hope. This was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Just then, Ben, the animal behaviorist, walked into the kennel area. He had been working with the shelter for years and was the one person Emily trusted when it came to handling stressed or anxious animals. He gave her a quick nod and knelt down beside her. "How's she doing?" Ben asked, his voice low and calm, not wanting to startle the dog. "She's nervous, but she's not aggressive, just a lot of fear," Emily replied quietly, her eyes never leaving the German Shepherd. Ben watched the dog closely, his brow furrowed. It's always tough when we don't know the background. It's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Yeah, Emily agreed, her heart aching for the dog. I just don't understand why someone would do this. Leave her here like this, all alone. Ben's expression softened. We don't know the whole story yet, Emily. But we'll find out. Right now, we just need to get her to feel safe. Emily nodded and looked at the dog again. She could see that the German Shepherd was beginning to relax just a little bit. Her body wasn't as stiff, and she was watching Emily with a curious gaze. It was a small sign of progress, but it was something to build on. We'll take it, slow, Ben said, breaking the silence. Start with the basics: trust, safety, and comfort. We'll get there. Emily watched as the German Shepherd took another step forward. This time she didn't pull away when Emily extended her hand. Emily slowly, gently, placed a treat in front of the dog, watching as the German Shepherd sniffed it warily. After a long moment, the dog cautiously took the treat from her hand. It wasn't much, but it was a sign that the dog was starting to trust her. Good girl, Emily whispered. As Emily sat with the dog, she knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey. But it was a journey worth taking, and she was ready to help this poor dog find her way again. One step at a time. The following days at the shelter were filled with uncertainty, but there was a growing sense of hope as Emily watched the German Shepherd, now named Daisy, slowly begin to trust her. Every day brought new challenges, but also small victories. The anxiety that had clouded Daisy's every movement was still there, but it wasn't as overpowering as it had been in the beginning. Emily could see that the dog was starting to realize that not all humans were threats. Still, the journey was far from over. Daisy remained tense, and every new sound or sudden movement would send her into a state of alert. But Emily noticed that when she approached quietly without rushing, Daisy seemed more open to her presence. It's okay, girl, Emily murmured softly, offering Daisy a treat. The dog took it carefully, her eyes scanning Emily's face, trying to gauge her intentions. Daisy was learning to accept Emily's kindness, but the emotional scars of her past were still very much present. On the third day, Ben returned to help with Daisy. The shelter was busy, and the other animals needed attention. But Ben had agreed to spend the morning with Emily, working specifically with Daisy. The thing about dogs like her, Ben began, is that you can't rush the healing process. Trust is something that has to be earned, little by little, and when they've been through trauma, it takes time. Emily nodded, understanding the truth of Ben's words. I just wish we knew what happened to her before she came here. It would make it easier to help her. Ben glanced over at Daisy, who was now cautiously sniffing the floor of her kennel. The not knowing is always the hardest part. But all we can do is work with what we have. Right now, she's showing signs of improvement, and that's a good thing. It's about taking small steps. After Ben's advice, Emily decided to take a new approach. She would begin working with Daisy using more calming exercises, hoping to build her confidence. The goal was simple: to teach Daisy that she wasn't in a dangerous place anymore, that she was safe. You're a good girl, Daisy, Emily whispered, sitting on the floor outside the kennel. She made herself small, sitting cross-legged with her hands resting in her lap, palms facing upward. I'm not going to hurt you. The first few days were slow. Daisy would inch closer, but every time she did, she would suddenly retreat, as though she wasn't quite sure if it was safe to move forward. Emily didn't mind the hesitation. She knew that progress wasn't linear. There would be moments of hope and moments of frustration. But as the days went on, Daisy's behavior became less defensive. Her tail, though still tucked, started to show signs of curiosity instead of fear. She began watching Emily with more interest, her body language softening just a little more each time they interacted. It wasn't until the 5th day that Emily felt a breakthrough. As she sat with Daisy offering another treat, the dog didn't shy away. Instead, Daisy stepped forward, her nose brushing against Emily's hand. Emily's heart raced. This was it. the moment she had been waiting for. "Good girl, Daisy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Just as Emily thought she had gained Daisy's trust, the sound of someone walking past the kennel startled the dog. Daisy's body went stiff and she immediately retreated to the far corner, her eyes wide with panic. Emily sighed, knowing that it would take more time for Daisy to truly relax. But she wasn't discouraged. She knew that setbacks were part of the process. That evening, as Emily sat in the staff room, she couldn't stop thinking about Daisy. She had seen the dog's potential for growth, and she felt a deep sense of responsibility for her. It's not her fault, Emily thought, her mind replaying the moments of Daisy's abandonment. The poor dog had been left alone in the world, and now it was up to Emily to show her that not everyone would hurt her. Emily made a silent promise to Daisy. She would do everything in her power to help her find peace. The next morning, Emily was ready to try something new. She had learned about a technique that involved using calm and soothing sounds to help anxious dogs relax. She downloaded a playlist of gentle, classical music, hoping that the soft tones would help calm Daisy's nerves. As the first notes filled the room, Emily watched Daisy closely. The German Shepherd's eyes flickered, and for the first time since arriving at the shelter, her ears started to lift. It was subtle, but it was a sign that Daisy was beginning to feel more at ease. Over the next few days, the music became a regular part of Daisy's routine. Emily noticed that when the music played, Daisy seemed to settle more quickly. She would lie down in her kennel, eyes half closed, as though the music was offering her comfort. Emily knew that this was just one small part of the healing process, but it gave her hope. It was proof that, despite the pain of the past, Daisy could learn to trust again. One morning, as Emily entered the kennel area, she found Daisy standing at the front of her kennel waiting. Her tail was wagging ever so slightly, and her eyes met Emily's with an unspoken understanding. "Good morning, girl," Emily said, softly, walking over to the kennel. As she opened the door, Daisy stepped forward, hesitating for only a moment before accepting the treat Emily offered. It wasn't much, but it was a victory. Daisy was starting to believe that there was safety and kindness in the world, and for Emily, that was enough to keep moving forward. The journey ahead would still be long, and there would undoubtedly be more challenges along the way. But Emily knew that with each day, Daisy was growing stronger. And together, they would face whatever came next, one small step at a time. Days passed, and the progress with Daisy continued, albeit slowly. Emily was now more familiar with Daisy's habits, the little ways in which she expressed her fear, and the tiny, yet significant signs of progress. Daisy was still wary of sudden movements, and loud noises could send her into a state of heightened anxiety. Yet with every quiet interaction, the dog seemed to trust Emily just a little more. She was no longer backing away at the sound of Emily's voice, and her tail, though still mostly tucked, wagged more frequently, albeit hesitantly. On the 10th day since Daisy's arrival, Emily decided to visit the shelter's front desk to see if there were any updates regarding her past. The shelter staff had been working hard to uncover more about the dog's history. Emily knew that understanding the full extent of Daisy's trauma could help her approach the dog's recovery with more compassion and strategy. As Emily entered the front office, she noticed a new face behind the desk. It was Sarah, a volunteer who had recently joined the team. "Hi, Emily," Sarah greeted with a warm smile. "How's Daisy doing today?" "She's doing okay," Emily replied, her tone a mixture of concern and optimism. "A little progress, but she's still very anxious. I was wondering if we had any updates on her past." "Actually, yes," Sarah responded, her expression turning more serious. "We did some digging and we found something strange. It turns out Daisy wasn't abandoned by a random person. We traced a vehicle license plate, and it looks like it was someone who had been coming to the shelter regularly." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped that Daisy's abandonment was a case of desperation or neglect, not something more complicated. "Do we know who it was?" Sarah shook her head. "Not exactly, but we know the car was registered to a woman named Laura Greenwood. We've also found some records of her taking other animals to the shelter, but there's no clear information on why she would abandon Daisy like that." Emily felt a mixture of emotions. Anger bubbled up inside her as she thought of how Daisy had been left behind, but she also felt a deep sense of sadness for the woman involved. So Laura Greenwood was the one who brought Daisy here, but why didn't she stay? That's what we're trying to figure out, Sarah said, her voice filled with empathy. It looks like she had the intention to surrender Daisy properly, but something changed. The person who abandoned Daisy tied her up and left in a hurry. We still don't know why. Emily's mind raced. Abandonment was never easy to understand, but this situation seemed even more complicated. Laura's sudden departure from the shelter left Emily with more questions than answers. If Laura had been a regular visitor, someone who had brought animals in before, why would she act so rashly? Emily needed to know more for Daisy's sake. I'm going to speak to someone in the animal control department, Emily said, her voice determined. Maybe they can help us find out what happened. I'll check the camera footage again too, Sarah added. There might be something we missed. As Emily walked back to the kennels, her thoughts were a whirlwind. She had been focusing so much on helping Daisy feel safe that she hadn't thought much about the circumstances of her arrival. Now, though, it seemed that the story was far more complicated than a simple case of abandonment. There was something deeper at play, and Emily was determined to uncover it. Later that afternoon, as Emily sat down to meet with Ben, the animal behaviorist, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her chest. Ben noticed her distracted expression and asked, "Everything okay?" "I'm not sure," Emily replied, her voice heavy. "We've got some new information about Daisy. It turns out she wasn't just abandoned randomly. Someone brought her here, someone who had been to the shelter before, but now this person is nowhere to be found." Ben raised an eyebrow. "That's strange. Do you think Daisy might have been part of a bigger situation?" "I don't know," Emily said, her mind still processing the information. "There's just so much we don't know. It feels like there's something we're missing." Ben nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes these situations aren't as simple as they seem. But whatever happened, we need to focus on Daisy now. If she's showing signs of stress because of her past, it's important that we don't add to that. We need to help her heal in a way that works for her." Emily sighed. She knew Ben was right. Still, she couldn't help but feel unsettled by the mystery surrounding Daisy's past. There was so much more to this story than what she had initially assumed. As much as Emily wanted to focus on Daisy's recovery, she couldn't help but feel that the truth would eventually come to light. And when it did, she hoped it would make sense of the chaos. The next morning, Emily received a call from the Animal Control Department. They had some new information. After reviewing the footage, they had identified Laura Greenwood, but there was more. Laura hadn't just left Daisy at the shelter. She had been acting strangely in the days leading up to her visit. It seemed that Laura had been under a great deal of stress and was possibly facing personal issues that had led to her decision to abandon Daisy. "We're still piecing things together," the animal control officer explained, "but we believe that Laura might have been going through a difficult time, and it led to her making a decision she likely regrets now." Emily's heart went out to Laura, but she couldn't help but think of Daisy. The poor dog had been caught in the middle of something she couldn't understand. All Daisy knew was that she had been abandoned, left in an unfamiliar place with no explanation. As Emily sat down with Ben later that day, she reflected on everything she had learned. The situation with Laura was tragic, but it didn't change the fact that Daisy had been left to fend for herself. Emily knew that it was up to her and the shelter team to ensure that Daisy would never feel abandoned again. "We'll get through this, Daisy," Emily whispered as she watched the dog lying quietly in her kennel. "We're going to figure this out and you'll have the life you deserve." Daisy's ears perked up at the sound of Emily's voice, and for the first time, Emily saw a small glimmer of trust in the dog's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind Emily that every step, no matter how small, was a victory, and she would continue fighting for Daisy's future no matter what it took. The days that followed were filled with emotional highs and lows for Emily and the rest of the shelter team. While they continued to work with Daisy, helping her adjust to her new environment, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty that kept Emily on edge. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing pieces of the puzzle when it came to Daisy's past. Despite the shelter's best efforts, Daisy still carried the weight of her experiences, and the scars of abandonment were deeply embedded in her heart. Emily's mornings had become routine, arriving early, checking on Daisy, and observing her subtle progress. While Daisy had become more relaxed around Emily, her fear was still palpable, and her body language often betrayed her anxiety. It was clear that the dog was still struggling to trust fully, and there were moments when the pain of her past seemed to resurface, taking over her fragile sense of safety. But one morning, as Emily entered the kennel area, something felt different. She could hear soft whining coming from Daisy's kennel, and when Emily approached, the dog was standing near the bars of her cage, her tail wagging cautiously. The tension in the air was different today. Daisy wasn't retreating into the corner as she usually did. She was, in fact, looking at Emily with a sense of curiosity, her eyes softer than they had been before. "Hey there, girl," Emily said, softly, her voice filled with warmth. She opened the kennel door slowly, making sure not to startle Daisy. For the first time in days, Daisy didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, sniffing the air and looking up at Emily with those big, soulful eyes. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "You're doing so well," she whispered, crouching down to Daisy's level. She reached out and gently stroked the dog's head, marveling at how far Daisy had come. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was a sign of progress, a sign that Daisy was beginning to trust even just a little bit. Over the next several days, Emily continued to work with Daisy, using positive reinforcement and a steady routine to help her adjust. The fear still lingered in Daisy's eyes, but there were more moments of connection. More times when Daisy would nuzzle against Emily's hand or follow her around the kennel, as though she was beginning to believe that not all humans were a threat. One afternoon, as Emily was sitting outside with Daisy, the shelter received an unexpected visit. A young woman, her eyes red from crying, approached the front desk. She was holding a leash with a small, nervous dog at her side. The shelter staff immediately recognized her as Laura Greenwood, the woman who had abandoned Daisy just days before. At first, Emily was unsure of how to handle the situation. She hadn't seen Laura in person yet, and she didn't know what to expect. She was conflicted. On one hand, she felt sympathy for the woman. After all, Laura had made a difficult decision out of desperation. On the other hand, she felt anger and frustration. Daisy had been left behind without a second thought, and now, Laura was here. What was her reason for returning? As Emily stood up to greet Laura, she noticed the sorrow on the woman's face. Laura's shoulders were hunched, and her eyes were filled with regret. She looked like someone who had made a painful choice and was now living with the consequences. "Hello," Emily said cautiously, her voice gentle but firm. "How can I help you today?" Laura took a deep breath, looking down at the dog beside her. I'm here to check on Daisy," she said, her voice shaking. "I know I made a mistake, and I'm so sorry for what I did. I just didn't know what else to do." Emily's heart softened, but she didn't let her guard down. She had seen this before, the regret, the guilt, but she also knew that Daisy had suffered because of Laura's decision. Still, Emily couldn't deny the emotion in the woman's voice. Laura was clearly remorseful, but the damage had already been done. "I'm glad you came," Emily replied, her tone cautious. "But I have to ask, why didn't you just surrender Daisy properly? Why did you leave her outside the shelter?" Laura's eyes welled with tears. She looked at the ground, as though ashamed. I didn't know how to face the shelter. I knew Daisy deserved better, but I couldn't provide that for her anymore. Things had gotten so bad for me, and I didn't have the resources or the strength to keep her. I didn't know what else to do, so I just left. There was a long pause, and Emily felt a twinge of empathy for Laura. No one knew what Laura had been going through, and Emily understood that sometimes people made desperate decisions when they felt trapped. Still, the reality of the situation was painful. Daisy had been abandoned, and it had left a scar that would take time to heal. "I understand that you were in a tough spot," Emily said softly, her voice steady. "But abandoning a dog is never the answer. It breaks their trust in us and it makes it harder for them to move forward. Laura nodded, wiping her tears away. I know. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how much it would hurt her. I just want to make it right. Emily looked at Laura, her expression softening. You've come here, and that's the first step. But Daisy's healing isn't just about what you can do now. It's about giving her the time and space she needs to trust again. She's still very scared. Laura nodded again, her hands trembling as she held onto the leash. I understand. I want to help, but I know I can't fix this overnight. Emily smiled kindly. You're right. It will take time. But the best thing you can do is support Daisy in her recovery. If you want to help her, you can be part of her journey. Just be patient with her and let her know that she's safe now. After a few more minutes of talking, Laura left the shelter, her head held a little higher. Emily returned to the kennel where Daisy was lying quietly, her tail still cautiously wagging. The dog was unaware of the conversation that had just taken place, but Emily knew that the road ahead would be long. As Emily sat next to Daisy, she felt a sense of hope that hadn't been there before. The woman who had once abandoned her was now taking responsibility, and while it wasn't a perfect solution, it was a start. Emily stroked Daisy's head gently, knowing that the dog's future wasn't defined by the mistakes of the past. It was up to Emily, and to Daisy herself, to create a new beginning, one step at a time.